Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and if you missed the previous videos in this series, I'll put a link down in the description below. And it's officially bulking season here at the farm. All of the animals are eating in preparation for the winter. So let's give you a quick update on everybody. Let's start off with the tiger bass we put in the pond. They're definitely starting to get aggressive, and we're going to work on a training session to start hand feeding them later in this video. And speaking of hand feeding, the little pet bass we call Tiger has the technique down and will literally eat anything you feed him. And next up, all of our wild baby ducks that hatched at the pond have learned how to fly, and they quickly figured out where the protein pellets were. And I set up a new feeder cam that gets some good close-up angles of all the deer and ducks. And last but not least, our aggressive bluegills are always ready to eat. It is time for the piranha playback. So now it's time for an update on Tiger and Copper. These are the first two fish that we caught out of the 5-acre pond, and we put them in this aquarium to give us an idea of how aggressive the fish are in the pond, and also to track their growth. And Tiger is a spitting image of Moby. He literally only thinks about eating all day long. You can see him smacking his lips, and we even had to try the finger test. That's going to hurt when he gets a little bit older. But one of the things that's really fascinating to me about Tiger is he's the first bass that I've ever had that will eat protein pellets. And obviously with the pellets being slam full of protein, if you can get a bass to eat them, they can get big really quick. So I'll be interested to see how long he eats them for. I think part of it's still a competition between him and Copper, but he seems to be enjoying them. And we also decided to introduce his first golden shiners this week. We caught a couple out of the backyard pond and put them in. Alright, now it's time for an update on the bass in the pond. So they're starting to get a lot bigger and more aggressive, and we're starting to see topwater strikes, and they're chasing the bait fish. And basically anywhere where you see a laydown by the bank, there's always lots of activity. And one of the problems is that there's only a few laydowns in the shallow water because when we built the pond, we put most of our structure out deep. And there's nothing wrong with that, it just makes it a lot harder to see them and film them. So one of my goals for today is to cut down some new treetops and laydowns and put them throughout the shallow parts of the pond. And that's definitely going to attract the bait fish, which will bring the bass right to it. And that's going to allow us to see a lot more of the fish activity. We'll see the bass up here blowing up the bait in these tops. But it's also important to keep a lot of this kind of structure in the pond because that gives all of the bait fish a place to hide and then therefore reproduce in the future. And if you just had a big empty bowl out here, the bass would eat all of the bait really fast. And even though they get big in a hurry, there wouldn't be anything left to eat. Alright, we're over here on the back side of the dam, and these are the types of trees that I like to sink as tops because if you're ever fishing them and you get your lure hung up in it, you can easily break the limb off. But at the same time, it's real bushy and leafy. Got lots of limbs, lots of place for those fish to hide. So you can see that's a big tree. We'll just cut one or two of the limbs off. We've got several of these trees, so we'll just take a few limbs off of each of these trees and then pile them all together and sink them. All right, got her loaded up. We're going around just setting out some piles. And then I'm gonna come back around and tie them to a block and sink them. Ooh, it gets deep quick right here. This is down here on the dam. Perfect. And as you can see, the water's down just a tad because we're right here in the hottest part of the year. So I'm going to leave some of these limbs sticking up out of the water. So when that water level rises, we'll still have a little above the water level. And that'll also give the birds and ducks something to hide in. All right, one down, about 4 or 5 more to go. If you look closely, you can see all the blue heron tracks walking along the pond's edge. Alright, got a pretty good sized one going right here in this shallow pocket. Alright, I like this spot a lot because I'm going to take some of that leftover pea gravel and put it here on each side of it. Definitely going to be a bluegill hangout. Alright, last spot right here by the dock. We're going to put a big brush pile. There we go. I just put that top out about 30 seconds ago. The bubbles are still there, and you can already see the groups of shad right there coming in to hang out around it. That's awesome. So in one of our previous videos about a month ago, we partnered up with EcoFlow, and they provided 2 battery banks to help us power our cabin out here at the farm. And these batteries use solar panels to charge them up, and everything's worked out great with those. But EcoFlow came out with a new product to work alongside of the Delta Pro called a smart generator. And it's basically for those rainy days when the sun's not out. You can use this generator to charge your batteries up. But one of the coolest features about this generator is it can run off of gasoline or propane. So it's time to test it out. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is take off this side panel and connect the 2 battery terminals. And then the last thing we have to do before starting it is add some oil. Now, one of my favorite features about this generator, there are multiple ways to start it. You got your conventional pull cord, but you can also do an electric start. All right, now we're going to test out the app and see if we can start it from the app. Just swipe it here across the bottom. And as most of you know, you should always run these generators outside, but another nice feature is it has a CO2 alarm built into it, as well as engine oil, fuel, and temperature alarms. And I'll have to say it's pretty quiet compared to most of the generators I've heard, so if you're in the market for a new generator, I'd highly recommend this EcoFlow Smart Generator, and I'll put a link down in the video description below. It's got 1800 watt output, and a 4-liter gas tank will run for about 3.5 hours. And it also ties into the Delta Pro or Delta Max, which means rain or shine, you'll always have some juice in the batteries. So one of my goals for this pond was to train some of the bass in here to eat out of my hand. And we've done this with all of our pet bass in the past. This was a couple years ago training our 2 pet bass, Bonnie and Clyde, in the backyard pond. And then obviously it only took Moby about a day to learn how to eat out of a hand. And even the little guys already started to do it. But the main reason I want to do it out here at the pond is just because it gives you a little bit more of an interaction with the fish, and it kind of creates a bond with them, or at least it shows you what their personality is like. You can definitely tell which ones are aggressive. But I decided to start this out, we're going to try to do it at night, because that's the only time during the day I can really see what's going on and see when the bass are in the area. And as you watch these nighttime clips, the longer, skinnier fish are the bass, and the short oval fish are the bluegills. And one of the things you'll notice first is that there's no longer any bait fish in this area, and that's because all of the bass finally got big enough, and these night lights are one of the spots they ambush them at night. And one of the things I've noticed is that most of the bass stay on the outside perimeter of the light. You can barely see them, just lurking around. And so I'm just going to start tossing some golden shiners out and seeing if I can get them to react. And today's just going to be a trial, but you'll see more of these hand feeding videos in the future. And typically what you do to initiate the feeding is create some sort of a sound. For instance, on all of these protein feeders on the docks, they have a countdown timer that beeps 10 times before it shoots the pellets out, and that's basically like an alarm, and all the bluegills hear it, and they swim up to the surface, and they're ready to eat right whenever the pellets come out. And it can basically be any sound that we choose. I've seen people take a paddle in the past and slap the water with it. I've also seen a bell, like a dinner bell ringing. But the main thing is you just have to be consistent with it and do it long enough so they catch on to it. So I'll let you all decide what the feed triggering sound is going to be. Just leave a comment down below. It could be music, like Jaws music. Basically anything you think of that makes a sound, I'll try it out. And you can see we finally have a few bass starting to catch on. And they know it's feeding time. And this little bass really wants to eat this shiner, but he thinks it might be a little bit too big for him. Got him. So unfortunately, folks, just as things were starting to get good, we had a big thunderstorm come through, and it dirtied up the water and basically ended the night. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to stay committed to it, and you'll see a lot more of this style feeding in the upcoming videos. Alright, now it is time to catch another bass out of the pond and see how big they've gotten. And we've caught two so far. The first one was Tiger, and then the one we caught right after that was a little bit bigger. So it's time to see if they've grown any. And I caught those first two bass off this rooster tail, so we're going to try it again. Got him. Oh yeah. They're getting big. Hey little guy. Check them out. Definitely getting bigger. Happy to see the progress. Still real thick right there in the stomach, so they're eating good. That's all I wanted to see. And he's off. Caught him right there off that little treetop we put out. It's already producing. And I've had several of you ask about the contest where we're naming the bass and tagging them. So here's an updated list, and if you're new to it, basically we're going to tag the first 104 bass that we catch. And we're just cycling through the alphabet 4 times. So if you see a blank space beside a letter on this spreadsheet, then that spot is open, and you can leave a comment with a name suggestion. And so if I select your name, that becomes your fish, and we're going to have several contests. For instance, the first bass to reach a pound, and the first bass to reach 5 pounds, and the first fish we catch on topwater. We're going to scan their tag, and if that's your fish, you win, and we're going to have several prize packages, and things like a weekend trip out here to the Crimson Oak Pond. Alright, time to see if we need to fertilize. Even though the water's got a little bit of a stain color to it, it's starting to look a little clear to me. Any visibility over the 20-inch mark, we're going to need to fertilize. So let's go ahead and drop that in. It's not bad. We're looking about 16. No need to fertilize today. Alright, out here at the Oak Throne, trying to get some underwater footage. Just dropped a couple GoPros in there. See if we can get in these bass coming up to the surface. There's one, and there's two. Right up in the thick of it. Yeah, and you know, we can't do one of these videos without doing a night lapse, and it's kind of a shame because we caught a full moon tonight, but it was a little overcast, so you couldn't see all the stars. And it's that time of year where we have those thunderstorms pop up every day, and you can see one there in the background right above the cabin. And when morning rolls around, that means it's feeding time. You'll start seeing some of the bass chase the bait fish, and the birds cruising along. And there's a good shot of all the ducks. And last but not least, Mr. Blue Heron. But speaking of the ducks, we had 9 baby ducks hatch here at the pond about a month and a half ago. And this week they finally learned how to fly. And it's been really cool to watch. And sometimes in the evenings, they fly over to other ponds, probably to get away from all these owls. I hate to see them go, but I know there's a pretty good chance they're going to come back. Because there's so many cool things in the pond, like the oak throne, for them to dive and feed off of. And having the protein pellets in the feeder definitely doesn't hurt either. So I was raised in the outdoors and basically been around wildlife all my life, but that's one of the coolest parts of having this farm and the night vision camera set up. And now I can observe all the wildlife at night, and that's naturally when most of these wild animals come out of the woods. But one of the things we've been debating over the past few videos is whether or not these animals were coyotes or foxes, because they've been hanging around the deer a bunch, and every week we get a lot of people comment and say they're foxes. But after watching them for several weeks, I'm still convinced that they're coyotes, and it keeps on amazing me to see how they interact with the deer. So growing up, I've always known that coyotes were a predator of deer, but I honestly didn't think that they would hang out or tolerate being around each other at all. But as you can see here, we got a bachelor group of bucks and a pack of 5 coyotes. That just seem to be hanging out like it's another normal day. You can see sometimes the deer get a little bit interested to see what's going on and check them out, but for the most part, don't seem to mind them at all. Now let's kick back and watch some wildlife clips and see how all this unfolds. And another quick update on the dove field. It's coming along good. You can see the sunflowers are starting to pop up. It's always Sarah's favorite time of year. And we got a lot of brown top millet out there that we cut strips through. And there will be thousands of seeds and birds flying in from everywhere. And now it's time to feed Mr. Moby. Alright folks, that is going to wrap up this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button because, as you can see, there's an abundance of wildlife making this pond their new home. And we're excited to see these little bass and bluegill grow up and have a lot of cool things planned for them in the future. But I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and we will see you all next time.